start by talking about the role that loan servicers play in our student loan system. Borrowers take out loans from the federal government to pay for school. And when it's time to collect, the government pays hundreds of millions of dollars to companies called loan servicers to manage the repayment process. Today, we have the CEOs of two of the largest loan servicers, Navient and FIA. Mr. Remondi, your company, Navient, gets paid hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to service student loans. So I want to run through some of the highlights of Navient's record over the last decade. In 2013, the Department of Education's Inspector General found that your company, which was then called Sallie Mae, violated the terms of its contract by failing to report borrower complaints in its debt collection business. Is that correct? Mr. Remondi?
Senator, I'd have to go look at the details of that back in that time frame, but
Okay.
our job is obviously to comply with the rules and the laws, and we work very hard to make sure that we help all borrowers successfully manage their loans.
Okay, but this is a case where you didn't follow the rules, and I'll just enter that into the record, the actual report on that. In fact, in the last 7 consecutive Department of Education surveys, Navient has been dead last in borrower satisfaction. So I guess it's not a surprise if you wanted to hide consumer complaints. Let me ask this question differently. Attorney General Healy, you're one of the nation's leading consumer protection enforcers. You just heard the CEO of Navient say that they comply with the law. Is it your view that Navient does its best to follow the law and generally looks out for the interests of student borrowers?
Thank you, Chair Warren. The answer to that is no. And I think we've spent a lot of focus on forward thinking in terms of what needs to happen in terms of fixes. I support that as somebody who has done so many investigations and so many lawsuits and heard directly from borrowers who are actual people, not frogs in a pot, but actual people like the Deramir Perez's of the world coming to my office. I will tell you that we have received countless complaints about poor servicing practices. And, you know, you can blame Congress, you can blame the Department of Ed, you can blame for-profit schools, you can blame colleges and universities. The burden should not be on the borrowers, though, who repeatedly, through our investigations, both with respect to Navient and FIA, okay, were shown time and time again to have misled borrowers, to have made misrepresentations to borrowers, to have completely bungled up in catastrophic failures the way those loans were serviced, to the detriment of hundreds of thousands of borrowers. I spoke of the 200,000 of borrowers in Massachusetts affected by FIA alone. That's just one small story. And finally, with respect to Navient, just to remind folks, you know, the CFPB in investigation detailed and something that Navient reported, and I find it astounding. Their battle cry was to, quote, forbear them, make them relinquish the ball. Don't work with them on IDR, but just keep them going in these loans. And the second thing that Navient also represented in the past, arguing, quote, there is no expectation that the servicer, in this instance in Navient, will act in the interest of the consumer. That's a problem.
Thank you, Attorney General Healy. You know, in fact, we're not talking about a few isolated incidents. In fact, Mr. Remondi, in 2016, 29 states investigated Navient for illegally, quote, paying call center workers based on how quickly they could get struggling student loan borrowers off the phone instead of actually helping them. You're currently being sued by 6 different states. In 2017, a federal audit found that Navient steered borrowers to repayment options that actually made it harder for them to pay back their loans so that call operators could save time and money. Navient even illegally overcharged the government for years to administer student loans to the tune of $22 million, but you've refused to pay it back for 8 years. So, Mr. Remondi, if a person who worked at the Department of Education stole $22.3 million, they'd be fired. And if they were prosecuted for embezzlement, they could go to jail for 27 years. But Navient isn't a person, Navient is a contractor that never faces real long-term accountability. So can you explain why your government contracts haven't been canceled? and why Navient has continued to reward you personally with nearly $40 million in compensation since 2014, even as these scandals pile up?
Well, Senator, some of these are allegations that are not true. And it's why one of the
I'll say
things, as
they're
I
all in
said,
public record.
no, they're accusations and not necessarily based on facts. But our goal is to help all borrowers, as I said, successfully manage their loans. And that's why my teams and I regularly listen to borrower calls. We're constantly making improvements to the way our programs work. We also deploy a very highly trained and caring team of professionals who help borrowers each and every day. And the results of this is that we are actually lead the industry in helping borrowers avoid default. And as you know, the devastating consequences that are associated with that. We we perform extremely well in enrolling borrowers in income-driven repayment plans. And we've used this insight that we gather from customers to be very innovative and develop new programs and solutions or processes that help more borrowers be successful. Recently, we rolled out an electronic e-sign program for income-driven repayment plans. And this was because we saw from our data and call listening that customers were having trouble completing the complex enrollment forms that are associated with income-driven repayment, 10 pages long, filled with jargon. And we took that system, developed an alternative, filled out the applications for them so that they would be accurate and complete, and sent them to them for electronic signature. We more than tripled the response rate. So very,
Mr.
very
Remondi,
performance.
I appreciate that. And I understand you're here to talk about the good things that your company has done. But you have been sued repeatedly, and you have been found to owe money that you have refused to pay. And this has happened over and over. And as I said, in the last 7 surveys, Navient came in dead last in satisfaction among student loan borrowers. So I'm glad for you to stand here and paint a general picture, but Navient made more than $500 million last year profiting off a broken system. The federal government should absolutely fire Navient. And because this happened under your leadership, Navient should fire you. But the problem is bigger than that. More than 40 million borrowers are trapped in a rigged game. They're crushed by debt. They're hounded by servicers and debt collectors. It is a massive drag on our economy, and we need a new approach. Canceling $50,000 of student loan debt would free millions of people from the traps that Navient and other servicers have laid for them. Thank you.